Back in 1974, a down-on-his-luck vet approached the legendary Dean Martin, asking for just a buck. The events that followed remained buried in silence for nearly half a century. This wasn't just any panhandler. The man was famished, having gone without a scrap of food for 3 full days. But beneath the grime was a highly decorated hero of the Korean War who had been stripped of his entire world. Gone was his wife, his house, and his very purpose for breathing. Standing outside the glitter of the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas that September evening, he summoned every last drop of bravery to walk up to the most famous entertainer in the nation. At that time, Dean Martin was more than a celebrity. He was a god among men completely out of reach. Every single week, 40 million viewers tuned in to see him. He rubbed elbows with presidents and knocked back bourbon with Frank Sinatra. The King of Cool lived in a stratosphere far removed from the gritty reality of survival. So it seemed impossible when this destitute soldier managed to whisper a simple 5-word plea. "Sir, can you spare $1?" The reaction that followed caught everyone off guard. The passing vacationers, the cameraman who snapped the iconic shot, and most of all, the man begging for help. You see, the crooner didn't just casually reach into his back pocket for some loose cash. He didn't flash that famous grin and keep moving either. Instead, his next move sent shockwaves through the crowd. It peeled back the layers of a secret Dean had guarded his whole professional life, revealing the true character buried deep beneath the tuxedo and the bright lights. This tale isn't just about a request for spare change. It unveils a reality that Tinseltown would have preferred to keep under wraps. It is a raw look at suffering dignity and the profound act of truly acknowledging another person's existence. But the real kicker that makes this story stick with you is this. That old soldier held onto a specific item from that encounter for 24 long years. It was only after he passed away that his relatives discovered it tucked inside his billfold. What exactly was it? Stick around once you learn what Dean whispered and what that vet guarded until his dying day. Your entire perspective on compassion will be transformed. If these kinds of touching histories resonate with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment, letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. Let's go back to September 14th, 1974. The desert air was still warm outside the Sands Hotel in Vegas, and Dean Martin had just wrapped up another packed-to-the-rafters performance. For 2 solid hours, he delivered the music, the jokes, and that smooth charisma that justified his paycheck as the Globe's highest-earning performer. At 57 years, young Dino looked untouchable. Between his hit TV series, the blockbuster films, and the enduring lore of the Rat Pack, he was on top of the world. The world was his oyster. However, his inner circle knew a truth the paparazzi lenses missed. Once the curtain fell, he had a specific routine he never broke. He would sneak out the rear exit and wander the silent back streets by himself. His daughter Diana once questioned him about these solitary strolls. His response was chill-inducing. He explained that the guy on stage was just a role. The walk was necessary to remind himself of the man behind the mask. On this particular evening, reality was sitting there waiting for him on a lonely bench next to the parking garage. Meet Robert James Caruso, known as Bobby to his pals. At 52, this Navy vet had survived 2 tours in Korea and brought home a Bronze Star for dragging 3 injured comrades out of the line of fire. He returned to the States a bona fide hero and carved out a decent living turning wrenches as a mechanic in Detroit. He tied the knot with Grace, his high school love, the one person who could make his war trauma feel manageable. But then tragedy struck when Grace fell ill. It was cancer. The cost of treatment drained their savings dry. Even with Bobby pulling double shifts at the shop, the money just wasn't there. When Grace passed in 1971, a part of Bobby was buried with her. He turned to the bottle to cope, lost his employment, and by 1974, he had been living on the streets for 3 hard years. Despite his situation, Bobby lived by a code. He never hassled people for money and always maintained his manners, addressing everyone as sir or ma'am. He tried his best to stay presentable. He would remind himself at the start of each day that while he may have lost his roof, he hadn't surrendered his self-respect. On that fateful night, Bobby was clutching a piece of cardboard with a simple message scrawled in neat handwriting: "Veteran hungry, please." He picked that specific location because the faint sounds of the orchestra would drift out from the sands. Bobby was a music lover and Dean Martin was his absolute favourite. He couldn't possibly know that within 5 minutes that iconic voice would be addressing him directly, sparking an interaction that would alter the course of both their destinies. Suddenly, the service entrance of the hotel swung open. Out stepped Dean Martin into the balmy evening, undoing his bow tie as he walked. He began his usual solitary trek, silent and deep in contemplation. Bobby spotted him instantly. Even in the shadows, you couldn't miss that stride. The relaxed swagger and the perfectly fitted tuxedo were dead giveaways. Bobby's pulse skyrocketed. This wasn't just some random out-of-towner. This was Dino the man whose records had been Bobby's only comfort during the freezing winters of the war. The very same artist who sang the ballad Bobby and Grace had swayed to during their first dance as husband and wife. His gut told him to keep his mouth shut. You don't approach a living legend. They usually have bodyguards lurking. But the gnawing pain of 3 days without food overrode his hesitation. His hands trembled uncontrollably, but seeing Dean walking solo without a wall of muscle around him gave Bobby a sudden burst of bravery. He rose to his feet slowly and smoothed out his tattered coat, an automatic reflex left over from his service days. Keeping a respectful gap so he wouldn't spook the star, he spoke up. "Excuse me, sir." Bobby managed to say, his voice cracking and barely audible. "I hate to intrude, but I'm a veteran and I haven't had a meal in quite some time. Do you think you could spare a single dollar?" The interaction that followed was immortalised by pure chance. A budding photographer named Michael Torres was just heading out after photographing a wedding reception. He clocked Dean Martin immediately and instinctively brought his viewfinder up, sensing a significant moment was unfolding. Those shots would later grace the pages of Life magazine. Dean halted in his tracks and pivoted to look Bobby square in the eye. It wasn't that quick, arrogant glance most celebrities throw at strangers before rushing into a waiting limousine. No, Dean stopped dead in his tracks and turned his entire body around. For several agonising seconds, silence hung in the air. He simply stared. Anyone who truly knew the King of Cool would recognise that specific look immediately. It was that same intense stillness he summoned right before delivering the heartbreaking lyrics of his most serious ballads. It was the heavy pause before something genuine was about to surface. "What's your name, friend?" Dean asked, and the tone of his voice was far softer and more gentle than Bobby had ever anticipated. This was not the booming voice of the Las Vegas showman. It was something quieter, something incredibly human. "Robert Caruso, sir," the man stammered, straightening up. "They call me Bobby. I served in the Navy Korea." Dean nodded his head, slowly absorbing the information. Then he did something so unexpected that it made the breath catch in Bobby's throat. It was a gesture that absolutely shocked every single onlooker on that busy street. The legendary Dean Martin lowered himself and sat right down on the dirty concrete bench next to the homeless veteran. What he said next would unveil a deeply personal secret that Dean had kept carefully hidden from the public eye for his entire career. Before I reveal exactly what Dean confessed on that bench, make sure you are following us. Drop a comment below telling me what you think the King of Cool whispered in that moment. I promise you the truth is more powerful and moving than any Hollywood script you could imagine. Dean Martin leaned back against the hard bench and gazed up at the vast Las Vegas sky. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. It was stripped of all the performer's glitz and polish. It was raw. "Bobby, you want to know a secret? This is something I have never told a soul outside of my own blood relatives." He didn't even wait for a response. "My name isn't Dean Martin. It never was. My real name is Dino Paul Crocetti. I grew up in a place called Steubenville, Ohio. My father broke his back working in a steel mill. There were weeks when we didn't have enough cash to put food on the table. I know exactly what that gnawing feeling in your stomach is like. I know what it feels like when people look right through you like you are a ghost, like you don't even exist." Bobby just stared at him wide-eyed. This was Dean Martin, the man with the easy charm, the perfect tuxedo, and the golden life. And here he was talking about starvation and the pain of being invisible to the world. "You said you served over in Korea?" Dean continued, his voice thick with emotion. I was too young for the Second World War. I got a medical deferment. Bad eyes, they said. Do you have any idea how that felt, watching brave men go off to fight and die for this country while I stayed home singing silly songs in nightclubs? The real heroes, Bobby, they aren't guys in tuxedos like me. They are guys like you. Men who stepped up when it mattered most. Dean reached deep into his pocket and slowly pulled out a $1 bill, but he didn't hand it over right away. He held it in the space between them as if it were a sacred religious artifact. You asked me for $1 and I'm going to give it to you. But I need you to understand exactly why I am doing this. It isn't because I pity you, and it isn't because $1 means nothing to a guy like me. I am giving you this bill because of how you asked for it. Dean's dark eyes locked intensely onto Bobby's weathered face. You stood up tall. You looked me right in the eye. You said, "Sir," and told me you served this country. You asked with dignity, Bobby, and dignity is something all the money in the world cannot buy. It is the one thing nobody can ever take away from you unless you let them. He pressed the crisp bill into Bobby's palm but kept his hand covering it. I want you to keep this specific dollar. Do not spend it. Keep it in your pocket as a constant reminder. Your dignity is worth more than every paycheck I have ever earned. And asking for help is not a weakness, my friend. It is just the first step to standing back up on your own 2 feet. Then Dean stood up, brushing off his suit pants, but he wasn't finished yet. When was the last time you had a real meal, Bobby? I don't mean scraps from a bin. I mean a real hot meal. Bobby racked his brain but couldn't remember. That is exactly what I thought. There is a diner about 4 blocks down the road called Rosie's. The owner is a guy named Sal. He came over from Sicily around the same time my own family came to America. I am going to walk over there with you right now. I am going to buy you the biggest steak on the menu, and then I'm going to ask Sal if he has any work for you dishes, clean up anything. Because what you need right now isn't charity, Bobby. What you need is a fighting chance. Bobby Caruso would later tell reporters exactly what happened in that emotional moment. He started to weep openly on the street, not from shame and not just from relief, but from a feeling he hadn't experienced in 3 long years. It was the overwhelming feeling that someone actually saw him as a human being worth fighting for. But the big question remained, would Sal actually give a homeless man a shot? What would happen during that walk to the diner? The stroll to Rosie's diner took about 15 minutes. But in that short quarter of an hour, something truly remarkable occurred. Dean Martin and Bobby Caruso talked not as a wealthy celebrity and a homeless drifter, but as 2 sons of immigrant families who understood the grind. Dean asked about the war in Korea, about earning the Bronze Star, and about a girl named Grace. Bobby asked about life in Steubenville, about what it felt like to perform for presidents, and he asked if all that fame ever got lonely. Every single day, Dean admitted with a heavy sigh. You can be surrounded by 1 million screaming fans and still feel completely and utterly alone. By the time they reached the front door of Rosie's, Bobby was walking with a completely different gait. His shoulders were back. His head was held high. He was making eye contact, laughing at Dean's jokes and speaking in full confident sentences, and for the first time in 3 painful years, he felt like the man he used to be before the hard times hit. Sal Benedetto had owned Rosie's Diner for 22 years. He had served Dean Martin hundreds of times, late-night meals after shows, early morning coffee before flights. But he had never seen Dean walk in with someone who looked like Bobby. For a split second, Sal hesitated near the counter. Then Dean spoke up loudly. Sal, I want you to meet my friend Bobby. He served in Korea. He has a Bronze Star. He is the real deal, Sal, not a pretender like me. I need you to do me a personal favour. Sal's response was instant and heartfelt. Any friend of yours, Dean, and any veteran who served this country has a permanent place at my table. And hey, if you are hunting for work, I have been desperate for kitchen help for months. What followed that offer was not a quick snack. It became a legendary meal lasting nearly 2 hours. Dean went all out, ordering the massive steak on the menu for Bobby and grabbing one for himself to match. They sat there discussing everything from music and army days to the shifting culture in America. Even Rosie could not stay away, sliding into the booth to join the chat in between serving her other tables. From the shadows, photographer Michael Torres was snapping away, capturing candid moments that were destined for the pages of Life magazine. Torres later described the vibe perfectly. He said the atmosphere in that diner completely shifted. The other patrons stopped eating just to stare. They were glued to the sight of two men connecting across every social divide imaginable, the mega-rich icon and the forgotten soul. But right there, none of those labels mattered. It was just two human beings understanding each other. When Dean finally stood up to head out, he gripped Bobby's hand and said, "You have got my private number now. If you ever find yourself in a bind, call me, and Bobby, hold on to that dollar bill." Bobby never let it go, but the public would not hear a whisper about this secret night for weeks. And when the story finally broke, the reaction was absolutely explosive. We are almost at the finale of this saga, but you have to stick around for one last shocking detail. You need to hear exactly what Dean told the press when grilled about that night and the secret item Bobby kept in his wallet until his dying day. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you are tuning in from. Flash forward 3 weeks and Michael Torres's photos hit the stands in Life magazine. The headline screamed across the page, "The dollar that meant everything." The spread showed Dean Martin chilling on a bench with a homeless veteran walking alongside him like an old pal and sharing dinner like they had been friends for decades. The response was insane. Thousands of fan letters flooded in. Everyone was dying to know more about Bobby and wondering if a Hollywood star like Dean was truly that genuine off camera. When reporters finally tracked Dean down for a comment, his answer was shockingly simple. He said, "A veteran asked me for a hand. I gave it to him. That is just what human beings are supposed to do, right?" But then he dropped a truth bomb that people have been quoting for decades. Everyone is obsessed with talking about success and fame and cash. But the most vital thing you can give another person is not money. It is your time. It is looking them in the eye and saying, "I see you. You matter," Dean admitted. "Bobby schooled me that night. He reminded me of my roots. Honestly, he did not need my help. I was the one who needed his." Bobby Caruso later released his own statement. "I begged for $1, but Dean Martin gave me my life back. He reminded me that I'm not just a homeless guy or a veteran. I am Bobby Caruso and I have value." The impact was real and measurable. Bobby held on to his job at Rosie's and within 6 months he earned a promotion to line cook. Veterans organisations all over Nevada reported a massive surge in donations. Behind the scenes, Dean quietly funded a program to help homeless vets get back to work. He never bragged about it to the press. That wasn't his style. But there is one final piece of the puzzle you need to know. This is the most important part. The truth about what happened to Bobby years later and what his family discovered in his wallet when he passed away. Bobby Caruso stayed loyal to Rosie's Diner for 11 years, eventually becoming the manager. In 1979, he married a waitress named Maria. They had a daughter together and named her Grace, a tribute to the wife he had lost years before. Every single weekend until the day he died, Bobby volunteered at the Las Vegas Veterans Center. He never forgot where he started. He never forgot the man who gave him a second shot. Dean Martin left this world on Christmas Day, 1995. Bobby sent a heartbreaking letter to the family. "He did not save my life with cash. He saved it with 5 minutes of his time and the belief that I was worth saving." Bobby Caruso passed away in 1998. At his funeral, his daughter discovered a worn-out dollar bill tucked in his wallet. It was the exact same dollar Dean Martin had handed him on that September night back in 1974. He had guarded it for 24 years. This story teaches us a lesson we should never forget. Real heroes are not just on movie screens or battlefields. They are found in the quiet moments when someone chooses to acknowledge another person's humanity, especially when looking away would be easier. Sometimes changing the world starts with a single dollar bill and the willingness to sit down and actually listen. If this story moved you, go ahead and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. The next time you see someone asking for a hand, remember that what they need most isn't just spare change. It is your time, your attention, and the recognition that they matter. Thank you so much for watching. Smash that subscribe button, and I will catch you in the next video.